All right, let's talk about some maxims of contract law. So, some of the high level rules of contracting, and this applies to both legal and lawful contracts. And let me explain the definition. Lawful contracts are between living souls. Legal contracts are commercial contracts that are generally between two artificial fictions. So this is important to understand that if I make as a living soul, if I make a contract with you, we are engaging in a lawful contract. If I, as a living soul, make a contract as the beneficiary of my trust being an artificial fiction, uh, that contract can be made with another artificial fiction. And that is a really important maxim of law that I think people often overlook, and that's that unequal things ought not be joined. So, say that again, unequal things ought not be joined in contracting is really critical. If you're trying to join unequal things, you're essentially creating an unfair contract, right? So let's look at some examples. As a living soul, I should not be contracting with an artificial fiction. An artificial fiction doesn't need to breathe air, doesn't need to consume food to live, right? So if I'm gonna, but artificial fictions, they don't care about clean air, or clean water, or what goes in their bodies, right? So we should never, and this is the problem, this is the fundamental problem that we have, is that we confuse living souls with artificial fictions, and we need to, that's like the whole point of this course, is to stop confusing living souls with artificial fictions. As a living soul, you need a contract as a living soul only with living souls, and when your trust is contracting with another trust or artificial fiction, you understand that and you are acting in that contract as the beneficiary, and you understand the role of the trustee. So really important maxim is equal things ought not be joined. This also applies to other things like minors. Minors are not as unequal as a fully developed adult who's had time to learn about contract law, hopefully. So minors have guardians contract for them. And if you are a guardian of a minor, it is your responsibility to contract in their best interest or hold their contract still until they come of age, right? So it's important that when we contract, we understand that we are matching up equal things. And we get into trouble when living souls think they are artificial fictions, or when artificial fictions like the United States Corporation or any other corporation treats us as artificial fictions. We get in trouble with things like mandates and being forced to inject things into our body. Those are all outside of true contract. They're all fraudulent contracts, and they are breaking a core rule of not contracting with equal things. So here's some other things we should dive into. So contracts, no written contract is enforceable if it doesn't have all these 7 elements. So you need to be of this competent age to and be able to consent as an adult to contract, right? So I've mentioned already minors having guardians that act in their stead. No child should be engaged in a contract, but nonetheless, your trust is set up for you as a child. And so the way the US corporation treats that is that they're guarding it for you until you come of age, right? But if you never claim your trust, you're always technically considered a minor in their eyes and a ward of the state. So that's an important that you look out for. There also needs to be free and genuine consent, no coercion. So this is often what happens. First of all, if a private security officer, also known as a police officer, say pulls you over because you have not contracted to require a license on your vehicle, there's lots of problematic contracting going on there, right? So first of all, uneven parties are contracting. The officer is acting as an agent of an artificial fiction private security company, and they are treating your driver's license, should you present one to them, as if that artificial fiction with your name on it is actually a living soul. But they are also attempting to contract with you when they ask you questions. They're attempting to engage you in a verbal contract, and when they have you request that you sign a ticket or any sort of paperwork, they are not disclosing that that's a contract. And then if they have a weapon on them and you don't, then that could be considered coercion, right? And therefore the contract can be invalidated for those reasons, among many, but most people don't know that. Full disclosure should be in all contracts. So it especially important when you are contracting as the beneficiary. You need to know that you're the beneficiary of your trust, not contracting as a living soul. So when when a bank actually gives you a mortgage, they don't give you full disclosure and tell you that they're loaning you your own money from your trust and charging you interest for the service, and that you could simply pay back that mortgage by getting more money out of your trust. So all mortgages are fraud because there's not full disclosure, and they're not telling you, the living soul who signs the paper, that you are actually signing as a beneficiary, yet they put your trust information in your notes and your deed and your if you have a deed of trust. They're not getting full disclosure that at the end of should you pay off your mortgage with other money outside of your trust, that mortgage is actually in the name of the trust. So it's still a trust property. Anyways, so all mortgages are fraud. And this is something to look out for when you are contracting. Make sure that full disclosure and to ask for it. So if you are questioning, why is my name presented in all caps, you have the right to full disclosure in all contracts and force them to tell you whether they are intending to contract with you as the living soul, or intending to contract with you with your trust that also happens to have the same symbols as your given name. Also, there needs to be the whole point of contracting is that there's an exchange. And the exchange is supposed to be equal. So you have some eggs, I want some bread. We decide this amount of bread equals this amount of eggs, and there's an exchange. Beautiful contract, lovely. Let's do it. And if you look carefully at all the contracts that the corporations engage with you, they always have something that they're exchanging with you that they're calling a benefit. Let's say, for example, if you are totally entitled to do business as a living soul without setting up a LLC or S corp or C corp or any of those things. You can do business as a living soul, but they convince people that you need to set up a business entity to protect yourself, when actuality, in exchange for the right to have a business, you have to follow all their rules, all their codes, pay their taxes. But in exchange for that, they'll let you have bankruptcy. Yay! That's what we want. It's a bunch of companies committing bankruptcy. So that's an example of one of the benefits that they're exchanging with you. There's a lot of examples. I think that's the best one I can come off the top of my head. If I think of another one, I'll come back to it. The conditions and the terms of a contract are supposed to be very certain, not wishy-washy, not vague. That's a really important element. And there needs to be an understanding on both parties what they're getting into. And often the corporations are really good at obscuring this, and they get around this by putting the details somewhere else, like in another document, or hiding it somewhere in the codes. Right? So, well, I told you that income tax is voluntary. It's just over on this website, way over here, not in this document that you're signing. And that's how they get around that. So it's really important that you don't just digest what's in this course, but really, to the best of your ability, learn their codes if you're going to contract with them. And then all valid contracts are supposed to have wet ink signatures. When was the last time you signed up for a credit card and supplied your wet ink signature? The wet ink signature is going the way of the dodo bird, and they're doing this on purpose to obscure the boundaries between living souls and artificial fiction more and more. But a really truly valid contract requires a wet ink signature. And so throughout the videos in my course, I make sure that if you want your contract to be valid, you provide your wet ink signature. Ideally your beneficiary signature or some other signature explaining clearly how you are intending to contract as a living soul, and provide your wet ink signature so that you are staying in honor in the contract. If the corporation you're engaging in is not providing a wet ink signature, it is not a valid, they are not validly contracting with you, and you are already winning. So a wet ink signature autograph is important. Oh, and let me also point out, there's a distinction between a signature and an autograph. So an autograph is done by a living soul, and a signature is done by a trustee or a beneficiary acting as an agent of an artificial fiction. So when you are contracting as the beneficiary to a trust, you are going to create a byline, which is a signature. And you can indicate that it's a signature by putting the word by, the two-letter by word, ... and doing your signature, and then underneath printing out your name and how you're contracting as the beneficiary. If you are conducting a contract between two living souls, you both living souls would use an autograph on that contract. So there's a distinction in between legal and lawful types of wet ink evidence that this is reciprocal consent happening between the two parties. Okay, and then another important maxim here is he who errs is not considered as consenting. So if there's an error in a contract, and everybody errs, to err is human, right? So that if you discover an error after you've contract, you have the right to amend the contract to correct the error. And so especially when you're dealing with these corporations, and say in the past you contracted as if you were your trust instead of contracting as the beneficiary to the trust, you can always correct it. You have that right. A contract is not valid if it has errors in it. So it is your duty to correct errors once you discover them. And it is actually the other side's duty also. So if you call out the correction, they have to accept it. Okay. These are some court cases that I think you could benefit from looking at if you want. But I want to scroll down to the last one. And this is so important. I had to learn this with a very hard spiritual lesson, but it is okay to absolve yourself out of a contract for any reason, but we live in a temporary realm. It's meant to be temporary, and you are going to be judged by your creator at the end of your life. And if you choose, and it's the best for you, to dissolve an obligation, you can dissolve it, and you're going to get judged at the end of your life for that action, and that's okay. I know it sounds sort of like a small thing, but it's really a big deal to know that any contract can be ended, and there's always remedy. So if you find yourself stuck, know that you can get out, and there's usually a really valid contractual way to get out of something. Okay, whether you should get out of an obligation that you committed to, that's for you to decide. But there's no reason why you should be stuck in something that's unequal. You were coerced into, it was created out of fraud. So know that if you you do have the right to end any contract, because once there isn't, if the consideration that you originally thought was a fair exchange at the beginning of the contract changes over time, there you go. That's a valid reason. And really, contracts are not intended to ever be permanent. Nothing in this realm is intended to be permanent. So I hope you learned some stuff from this video, and I will see you in the next one.